You need the special intent, and then you need to combine it with some action.
Yeah, well, you have both of those things, and this is something that I go over all the time. You have the Israeli officials incriminating statements. That is why you see Yoav Gallant and Netanyahu being issued arrest warrants by the International Criminal Court. Do we need to roll the beautiful bean footage of Yoav Gallant calling on imposing a Bronze Age siege warfare? We're dealing with human animals. We're cutting off their food, water, electricity, and fuel. This is a form of collective punishment. When you're formalizing and articulating a policy of collective punishment, and then you go and meaningfully carry those policies out to devastating consequences, it's hard to argue that it's not a genocide. And you can also look at Isaac Herzog. Isaac Herzog acknowledged that there were no innocent civilians in Gaza. That's a direct quote. So you're basically saying we are going to destroy every living human being in Gaza because there are no innocent civilians. So that is also a material intent. That is a call to genocide. Materially, what does that mean? You don't have to think too hard to understand what this means. And then they actually go and carry that out. We also have testimonies from IDF soldiers, not in this go-around, but in the past few go-around. Testimonies from IDF soldiers saying that they were told to fire upon anything that moves and anything that does not move. And if a house looks suspicious, they would shell the house, they would bomb the house, and then they would go check out if there was anybody in it. So much blatant intent. You have anonymous sources in the IDF coming forth. The recent 972 article, which outlined Lavender AI. Read this article. I'll drop it in the chat. It's a very thorough article about, exposing the AI kill lists that they generated and how they didn't even have any real oversight. They just made sure it was a male on the list, and if they were a male, the AI generated Lavender program came up with that name, then they were marked for death. Furthermore, they waited until these people entered their homes. There was a special subset within Lavender, or maybe it was a separate program entirely, but it was called Where's Daddy. Where's Daddy actually tracked their locations through their GPS, through their phones. In Gaza, people are so poor they have to share phones, so you don't even know who has the phone. All you know is that the phone just entered the home, and so now it's there's an alert sent to the IDF commander saying Muhammad's in his home now, and so they wait till 5 a.m. when they know that they're asleep, and they bomb the entire house, and they kill the entire family. There's just so much evidence. You could point to every day there's a new massacre. You could point to the World Central Kitchen where they bombed the same truck. They got out of the truck, got into a new truck, and they bombed that truck, and they went to another truck. They intentionally bombed, killed UN food relief workers. I mean, do you understand how insane that is? It's insane, the death toll of children, what the actual Palestinians are going through, but the fact that they're outright targeting Western institutions, humanitarian institutions, and they have no way of proving that they didn't know because it's all well documented. I mean, even the fact that UNRWA has Hamas embedded in its organization, that's completely false as well. UNRWA communicates with the Israeli government, and these people that work for UNRWA are vetted by Israel. So Israel vets these workers and then bombs them. They know who they are. They know what they're doing. They're receiving minute-to-minute information. These people don't want to get bombed, but they still get bombed. There's just so much in the documentary record, the historical record, and you're never going to get that from this chud here.
Part of a military installation trying to blow up some city, that's not enough. Otherwise, single war would be genocide. We have to ask ourselves, what is the...
Carpet bombing a civilian population is a war crime, Destiny. I mean, it was a war crime when the Americans carpet bombed Germany. It's always been a war crime. The most moral army in the world. He just said at the very outset, well, there's two things that you need to prove. You need to prove intention and you need to prove action. And in the case of Israel, all of those things can be proven. And that's why you have arrest warrants. I mean, because they're so unabashedly, unashamedly articulating this out in the open.
With all due respect, you're such a fantastic moron. It's terrifying.
No, again, October 7th did not start the operation in the Gaza Strip. What started the operation in the Gaza Strip was the illegal occupation of the Israeli government, unanimously condemned by the entire world community. You can say it till you blue in the face, but international law does not agree with Destiny here, okay? The fact that these people were dying quietly, Destiny, out of sight, out of mind, just because you weren't personally hearing about that is by design. You didn't hear about it. You're gonna go ahead and go along with the imperial imperial narrative, which says history began on October 7th. Year zero was October 7th. No one wants to talk about October 6th, when UN agencies were concluding that in the West Bank alone, it was going to be the deadliest year for children. Because up until that point, 40 children were killed, 240 Palestinians were murdered by the IDF. But we're not going to talk about that, right, Destiny? Because that's not conducive to our narrative. That's not complementary to our narrative. So it's all a bunch of bullshit. The idea that October 7th was the beginning of history and that this justifies. Even so, do you think on October 7th, do you really honestly believe that the Israeli government felt like they were facing an existential threat, that perhaps their government was going to be destroyed? Perhaps the Israeli state was going to be destroyed. Do you think that these kids, basically 18 to 24-year-old kids, barging over in hang gliders and bulldozers trying to bust through this fucking concentration camp technologically advanced wall, do you think that they were like the fucking Wehrmacht? Do you think that they were an invading army? The Palestinians don't have an army. They don't have a state to begin with. Everything must be understood in that framework. If you can't understand the framework of an illegal occupation, which is an act of aggression, and a war crime, which is considered the supreme criminal act in all of the land since 1945, articulated prosecuting the Holocaust, then I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to say to you. Like I say, you're a 5-year-old that doesn't understand how historical materialism works. You don't understand context. You just look at things as individual phenomena and you're completely lost like a little child. And that's what Destiny is. He's a little child. What is my response when someone says Palestine has never been a state? Native Americans never had a state. The Filipinos didn't have a state. The Hawaiians didn't have a state. This is good old settler colonial logic. The fact that the British Empire or the US Empire didn't recognize it formally, that's not a flex. That's not an argument to say, okay, well, these people didn't behave like a Western style nation state. They didn't organize their government. They didn't organize their society as we in the West do. So therefore, they deserve to be ethnically cleansed. They don't actually have that land. It doesn't matter what they're materially doing on that land. The fact that they've lived and settled that land for hundreds and hundreds of years, it doesn't matter. We have the right to go in and take that land from those people because they never formalized into a nation state, which, oh, by the way, was not for lack of trying. Once the Balfour Declaration was made in 1917, the Palestinians started forming against this. They were like, wait a second, the British are trying to colonize this land? They heard what was going on. They formed delegations. They formed like 12 separate congresses. They're called I forget how many. You can read in 100 Years' War of Palestine. They formed like 12 Arab congresses over the next decades, the interwar period, what is known as end of World War I, beginning of World War II. The interwar period, that those 2 decades some odd, you had the Palestinians literally trying to organize and acquiesce to the British Empire, basically plead their case and behave as they wanted. It's the same old story over and over again. You can draw a parallel to the Native Americans, okay? The Cherokee. The Cherokee famously tried to white manize themselves, behave more like the white man. You know, Sequoia was supposed to be a state in the United States of America. They applied to be states. They were denied. Why? Because they don't want them on that land, okay? That's the whole point. So to say that they were never recognized by their colonizers, that's not a point. It's like saying, you know, slaves were never recognized as free people by their slave masters. Okay, great fucking argument, dumbass. Yes, that is by design. It doesn't give you the right to enslave people. That should be easily understood by now. Maybe in the 1830s it wasn't, that slaves should be free, but we are in 2024, okay? And the power differential here in Palestine between Palestine and Israel is slave to slave master. If you can't understand that part, then you are doomed to be a smooth-brained baby turd burglar like Destiny is. The act of aggression contains within it the accumulated evil of the whole. So what does that mean? If you go and invade another country, there's actually 7 different acts of aggression, instances, examples. And by the way, Israel's guilty of them all. But let's just start with sending an army in to invade a territory. That is an act of aggression. So that means that if there's resistance movements that form to stop the invading army, and that leads more bloodshed, then that act is the fault of the occupier. It's the fault of the invading army because they started the act of aggression. So they bear the responsibility for all of the events that come after that simple act of aggression. Another act of aggression is a military occupation. Not only did Israel go in 1967 start a preemptive war by bombing airfields in Egypt, which was a war crime to begin with. That's an act of aggression. That's an act of war. So in 1967 they do that. In 1967, lo and behold, the UN resolution gets passed, 242, which I talk about extensively, that condemns Israel for starting that war and also condemns it for occupying the territory. Basically, annexing the territory is another war crime on top of the illegal invasion. Now you're occupying these lands. The United Nations emphasizes the inadmissibility of acquisition of territory via war. That is what Israel did. That is an act of aggression. So therefore, they bear the responsibility for that. They then occupied it, annexation, both war crimes. They then settled it. Okay, then they built walls around it. They blockaded it. They imposed a siege on these territories. These are all war crimes, every single one. Even forcing the civilians to flee out of fear of violence like they're doing now. That in and of itself is a war crime. You can't transfer parts of the civilians in occupied territories for fear of violence. You can't also transfer your own civilian population into the occupied territories. They've done that both in Gaza and the West Bank. So all of these things are indefensible, inexcusable, inadmissible, and condemnable, if that is a word.
Conducting military operations like you would in war. What are the
Yeah, but it's not a war, okay?
planes shooting at? What are all the artillery shooting at? Is it really only 35,000 people have been killed with all of these Israeli munitions?
No, it's probably much more. And also using starvation as a weapon is a war crime. And there's millions of people dying from starvation right now. I mean, literally half the Gazan population is facing a famine, okay? Yeah, is it only 35,000? Like, what are you talking about? That's 35,000 souls, you spineless turd burglar. Why are people paying attention to this clown?
Airstrikes. Who goes to genocide a group of people while telling all of them to flee first? Who goes to genocide a group of people while saying, like, hey, we're going to make phone calls, and hey, we're going to open up humanitarian corridors, and hey, we're going to try to ensure that enough aid is getting in? Who does this? If anybody is genocidal towards the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, it would be Hamas. Hamas operates in a way specifically to induce the maximum amount of civilian deaths. They booby-trap homes, so you don't know when you're entering a civilian house if it's going to explode or not.
That is completely false. Everything he just said was a lie. Let's go back.
Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, it would be Hamas.
World's smartest Zionists try not to project the crimes of the Israeli government onto the Third World Armed Resistance Group trying to fight for its own human rights. Challenge impossible. Absolutely absurd. Everything you said just now, Destiny, was a lie.
Hamas operates in a way specifically to induce the maximum amount of civilian deaths.
That would be Israel, motherfucker. Israel operates in a way to maximize civilian deaths. And it's only been articulated by the Israeli government itself. You can look at Gadi Eisenkot, the IDF head of the Northern Command. That's why Defense Minister and Prime Minister of Israel are faced with ICC arrest warrants right now. President of Israel, Isaac Herzog, even said there's no distinction. Everyone is guilty in the Gaza Strip. Okay, these are all calls to genocide. This is normalizing massive collective punishment, disproportionate violence. All of these things are war crime. You can say these things, sure. You can say them, and you can say them confidently, and you can say them quickly, but that doesn't make them true, okay? There's no evidence that you have. You're literally just yapping. Whatever is going on in this man's personal life, it is not good, okay? Destiny and Israel have one thing in common. They're both down bad.
Booby-trap homes, so you don't know when you're entering a civilian house if it's going to explode or not.
Yeah, you don't know if it's going to explode because Israel will bomb that house like they've done the entire Gaza Strip. Literally rope off entire neighborhoods so they can send the Caterpillar bulldozers in and just bulldoze the entire neighborhood. Again, a war crime just to do that, even if there's no body in it. You can't destroy people's homes, okay? You also said that they warn the population. Okay, sending an alert to 250,000 phones telling them all to flee is not a proper way of warning people. Okay, just telling them to flee. You know full well that you are going to create a state of pandemonium. Just like according to Norman Finkelstein, who says, if you say, in a case of fire, use the fire escape, and there is no fire escape, that's not a warning. The ability to properly warn people hinges on the people's ability to heed that warning and be able to do something about it. Giving people 50 minutes, hundreds of thousands of people, 50 minutes to vacate their homes before they get bombed is not a proper warning, okay? First of all, that's the first point. Then on top of that, telling them to go to safe zones and then bombing those safe zones is also a war crime. I can't believe I need to state that in 2024, but that is where we're at, okay? Why would they go through the trouble? Why not just go bomb them outright? Just drop a nuke on Gaza like they really want. Well, that's because of the international community. That's because they know that they can't get away with certain things. They have to make it look. It's called politics. Like, tell me you don't understand geopolitics 101, Destiny, without telling me. How silly.
munitions in basements. So when you're trying to figure out where
They hide munitions in basements. They hide munitions in basements. Have you ever thought, why doesn't Palestine have its own military bases? Why is Israel allowed to have military bases? Why is it that Israel can formally organize its military, army, and navy? Why does it have all of this infrastructure, military infrastructure? You're going to blame a state, which is not even a state because it's not given its right to self-determine, and you're going to blame them for not being able to have infrastructure. Okay, the fact that they are reduced to going under fucking ground. They're reduced to going into the basement. Because why? Because Israel bombs every fucking building. Why would Hamas hide in hospitals when that's the one place that Israel bombs every time? It's not like this is anything new. They've been bombing hospitals for decades and decades now. You think Hamas would legitimately think it's a safe idea to build a command center in a hospital when that's the one place that Israel bombs indiscriminately? You don't make any sense, okay? You are drinking the Kool-Aid. I want to ask you what your favorite flavor of crayon is.
of weapons are. You don't have a military target to attack. You've got to go do civilian houses to figure out where the arms are. They hide and they operate out of hospitals. Even though...
They hide and they operate out of hospitals. Source, trust me, bro. You know, of the hundreds of human rights reports conducted and researched and studied and investigated, I'm talking Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the UN itself, the UN Fact-Finding Commission, none of these reports ever have found conclusively that Hamas embeds itself in hospitals. Keep in mind, we're talking about a 25-mile long by 5-mile wide stretch of land. This is a tiny, tiny place on Earth. It's more densely packed than fucking Tokyo. Where do you want these people to go? You are whitewashing the crimes of the Israeli state by saying that they just have to bomb hospitals. Well, no, they fucking don't. They don't have to bomb hospitals. In fact, that's a crime against humanity. Even if there was a Hamas command center, it doesn't give you the right to go bomb a hospital. Do we say that when a school shooter enters a school and starts shooting up kindergartens, we should just fucking bomb the entire school? Should we do the Israeli approach? No, everybody understands that's fucking absurd, okay? But when Israel uses Javelin missiles, JDAM munitions, that burrow crater 25 yards wide, and the blast radius is felt for blocks, you know, for hundreds and hundreds of yards, collapses people's lungs who aren't even in the vicinity really because of the blast radius, and you're doing that in certain times of the day when you know that there's going to be a lot of civilians that are there, how can it be argued that you're not discriminately targeting those civilians? How can it be argued that you are not actually deliberately killing a lot of civilians? It's not that Israel is indiscriminately targeting civilians. Israel is discriminately, deliberately targeting civilians. That is the point.
And the chief surgeon of that Al-Shifa hospital said they weren't. We found CCTV footage that showed hostages literally being taken into the hospital with the doctors literally observing it. We saw Amnesty International.
Again, even if that is true, it doesn't give you the right to bomb the entire hospital, especially if they're hostages. Why do you think maybe they're trying to get Israel not to bomb the hospital because they know that Israeli hostages are in there? Well, we know that Israel doesn't care about its own hostages either. That's the Hannibal Directive for you. It's almost as if, Destiny, all of these things are articulated by the Israeli military itself. Everything that you're saying, running D for the IDF, they've already admitted to. You can stop this whole grift, okay? Everybody knows the truth. You are discredited by the people that you're defending, okay? It is very sick to pander for views by rationalizing the murder of unarmed kids. It's disgusting.
In 2014, that they know that Al-Shifa Hospital is operating an interrogation room.
Yeah, 2014, conspicuously, the year that Israel broke a ceasefire agreement and decided to launch its worst operation in the Gaza Strip. But they consider mowing the lawn, mind you, and the lawn is just blades of grass, right? And most of those blades of grass are children. Operation Protective Edge in 2014 was another war crime. Killed thousands of civilians, and they destroyed, tens of thousands of buildings. It was the worst destructive operation since the last one. Before that, Operation Cast Lead 2009. Everybody wants to say, oh, it must be Hamas rockets, though. They invited them on themselves. No, they did not. Every time a ceasefire agreement has been broken, it is Israel, okay, that instigates it. We're talking about the worst humanitarian crisis on earth. These people are, living in squalor, virtual slaves. They have no future. They have no clean water. They have barely any food. 80% of the Gazan population is reliant on humanitarian aid. They are not allowed to have an economy. They're not allowed to organize, okay? When you can't organize your own infrastructure, okay, that means that you are not able to have a society. They're not able to have a society. Most of them depend on foreign handouts, okay? The acts of goodwill from the international community, which is still far less because, Israel is imposing an illegal blockade. They block things like sugar, which Destiny defends because obviously sugar is used in Qassam rockets, is what he says. Make it make sense. And they want to talk about terror tunnels into Egypt. Studies have been done. If you actually read the literature, you know that 99% of their economy comes through tunnels. In the 90th percentile of their imports comes from a tunnel economy. Why is that? Because there's an illegal fucking blockade, okay? There's an illegal siege on the Gaza Strip. So that's what happens. You reduce these people to go underground. And most of the fucking shit that comes through the tunnels is reconstruction equipment, cement and food. And even if they do smuggle in food, a lot of it gets spoiled by the time it even gets. But we know this guy who's gonna go home at night and sleep in his air-conditioned and warm bed and have a nice meal and won't have to worry about his family being slaughtered or his neighborhood being bombed. Won't have to worry about where he's going to find his next meal or if he can drink clean water or if he's going to have a job. He doesn't have to worry about that. So what does he care? It doesn't affect him. But this little worm on the screen, should a similar fate ever befall this creature, we know how he would act, and he would betray that he's a hypocrite.
Nixon ordered Cambodian genocide. Clinton sent cruise missiles to Sudan, people died. Obama gave the orders to do drone strikes.